Welcome back to Andy Audio Walk. For today, I'll be doing a review on IEM Celest Pandamon. Let's check it out. Let's see what's inside. Okay, very funky looking box. Okay, the IEM itself. Grey colored cable, 2-pin configuration. An ornament here, looks like a keychain perhaps. And few selection of tips. Cleaning brush. Okay, I can see here there's two type of tips provided, both of them in 3 sizes. As can be seen here clearly, one of them is narrow bore and another one is the wide bore. And based on what I do know about tips selection, right, the narrow bore usually meant for bass focus and the wide bore meant for treble focus. Right, pretty much very simple and an easy affair of attaching it like this, just like many other IEMs nowadays. This one is for the right side and this one for the left side, and the tip goes like this. And it's ready to use. Okay, let's talk about the configuration itself. Pandamon is essentially the second release from Celest, which is a sub-brand from Kinera. And it is, in fact, a 10mm Square Planar driver, right? And if you recall correctly, the first release of Celest, which is Gumiho, it is in fact a Square Planar driver together with a balanced armature, designated as the tweeter. But otherwise, Pandamon is essentially just the planar driver itself, single each side. And the construction here on the faceplate, right, it is in fact 304L stainless steel. So these are metal, not just chrome plated plastic or anything like that. And based on confirmation from people of Celest, the grills that you see here, they are in fact open. So which means that this is not a closed system. It is it allows for air to travel in and out, which in a way would impact the sound itself as well, right? And looking here at the back, I must say that I am really happy to see that it has been well designed to be very ergonomic. Okay, see that? It's very smooth. Effectively means that entirely possible for me to wear this Celest Pandamon for very long hours of listening, right? In fact, up to 5 to 6 hours non-stop without feeling any kind of wear fatigue, right? The smoothness blends in properly with my ear concha, no issues at all. And the nozzle length itself being fairly moderate, alright? It is very easy to wear this Celest Pandamon. On the driver itself, again, back, surprisingly, the impedance rating for this guy is really low at 9 ohm. And with a sensitivity of 108 dB, it is meant to be highly efficient for a magnetic planar, or should I say square planar. And the cable itself, these are in fact OFC, right, cable, which is literally means they are primarily made of copper, oxygen free, and only available in 3.5 mm single-ended termination. So how does Celest Pandamon sounds like? Okay, to me this Celest Pandamon is a W sounding unit, like that, the sound curve. It means that there is a boosting on the upper frequency, lower frequency, and mid-range. So unlike V sounding unit, which has suppression of mid-range and boosting of upper and lower frequency, Pandamon in fact sounded a bit more balanced to my ear. Right. In fact, it reminds me a lot to Teen Hi-Fi P1, the original one, which is something which I really like. Tonal and timbre wise, I would consider Pandamon being organic and naturally realistic as well. It does not exhibit any kind of metallic or plasticky tint to the sound signature. Now let's go into the mid-range. The mid-range of Pandamon, I would just simply describe it as being forward and bold with the presentation. Bold means that it offers a bit more of intimacy, yeah, in front, in your face kind of short presentation, depending on which recording we are talking about. All right, it is in fact slightly warm, right, sounding, especially on certain female vocals, like the low key type of Diana Krall, contralto, or even Sine E, right? They tend to be sounding a bit more emotional, right, as opposed to being transparent. So depend on your preferences, this can be considered as a plus or a minus, right? Because some people, they prefer their mid-range and vocals to be a bit more transparent, whereas some people prefer it to be a bit more lush, and Pandamon being on the one that's offering a lush presentation for mid-range. That applies also well to instruments, be it guitars, percussions, or even electronics, right? It sounds fairly organic to my ears, does not exhibit any kind of digital, right, reproduction sort of presentation. Again, which is a good thing, right? Perhaps not as resolving as how I would have heard it from like more expensive, you know, IEMs, but it is not something I would complain either. In fact, I would say that mid-range presentation of Pandamon is very well balanced, right? Going to the upper frequency, the treble itself, I would say that it is fairly clean, accurate, and resolving, especially with the treble dynamics. There's a good sense of flow within the treble transient itself. It does not sound grainy, it does not sound, should I say, granular to my ears, right? Even with the most delicate of treble decays, right? It is always smooth, right? With equal amount of crispness to the presentation, okay? In fact, I would even say that Pandamon treble performance is more towards the sort of safe tuning sort of approach, right? It is definitely, right, not sibilant. It does not exhibit any kind of, should I say, audible pinna glare, right? Pinna glare basically means that the brightness between upper mid-range to treble. So Pandamon is free from that, which is a good thing. All right. Again, right, perhaps if I'm going to a bit more technical on the treble aspect of it, it is fairly detailed with macro details, but not so much on micro details, right? So there's a difference here, macro and micro, right? So macro is the primary body of treble itself, and the micro being the extended edge of treble itself. So the strength for Pandamon is more on the macro side of it. All right. So let's go into the lower frequency itself for bass. All right. Now, it depends on bass performance for Pandamon, largely depend on what sort of tips being used. Okay, if we were to be using, like say here, narrow bore, right? This is in fact the stock tips, right? It can be a bit bassy to my ears. I am saying that because I am fairly sensitive to bass responses, and in fact, when I first received this Pandamon and plug it into my ears using these tips, it was kind of overwhelming for me, the bass responses. Okay, and immediately I was forced to actually roll tips and put in something like this, which is in fact a slow rebound foam tips from my other IEMs, and that immediately fixed the situation for me. Bass now becomes a lot more, should I say, well controlled, right? A bit more neutral, right? And I think most importantly, I can clearly hear that the bass being organic and realistic, right? Timbre wise, it is definitely bold and richly textured, right? With the overall bass resolution, it also offers good depth, right? What interests me the most is that there's a seamless integration between mid bass and sub bass with the dynamic flow of how it transients between each of them, meaning that from mid bass all the way to sub bass, the decays itself, it is smooth and it is soothing, right? In fact, I would say that, right, the mid bass exhibit strong impact, right, especially for kick drum and electro synthesizers. Now, talking about the decays itself, right? The bass decay usually are being associated of how far they extend in the lower frequency, right? I would even say that it now depends also on how capable the partners are. If it attached to a very powerful partner, anything above 2 VRMS, right, it can be quite extensive, right? And it is always very smooth edge, right? It is a well-balanced presentation between smoothness and crispness, right? But however, despite even if using these tips, probably I would say that Pandamon is not strong enough even for bass head, right? Now, let's go into the technicalities aspect of Pandamon. On the technical aspect of it, right, I would say overall Pandamon is quite a capable unit, right? However, I must also state that it depends again on the source, right? Despite being rated at just 9 ohm and 108 dB of sensitivity, which is quite sensitive, in fact, supposedly easy to drive, right? It will sound great, but then again, the technicalities will really improve when partnered to something which is a lot more powerful. Something like, you know, this here, the one that I always use, Centrance Deck Poch HD, right? Kayin RU6, Ovidius B1, iBasso DC03 Pro, and also this one, HiFiGo bar. So all these are very powerful dongers, right? Each of them churning out no less than 2 VRMS of power with very high wattage, right? The key thing is that, right, when running on, let's say, directly from my phone, which is under 1 VRMS, I am hearing smooth and flowing presentation. However, I must say that that smoothness also will mask some of the technical aspect of it. For example, like the imaging, the resolution itself will seem to be a bit not as audible, or should I say pronounced, as when connected to something like this, right? So, being a magnetic planar, it is important to know that, right, Pandamon will sound the best as more power are applied to it. So when I talk about that, it means that once it has the proper juice pump to it, right, technicalities is just amazing. In fact, I would just openly say that, right, with the separation itself, with the sound stage depth, right, with the spatial positioning, which is holographic, right, and I think most importantly is that the dynamic flow itself, the transience of dynamic is very fluid, right? Something which I consider as equally analytical and musical at the same time. Okay, before I draw conclusion for this Celest Pandamon, it is best perhaps that I do a bit of comparison between this and some other competition within the same price bracket. We are looking at Pandamon on sibling, which is Gumiho, the first one released by Celest, and also KZPR1. Okay, let's compare it first with Gumiho. I will just make it simple. Pandamon is in fact a better tuned unit, right? And I say that because both, despite having the blue sounding curve, right, this Pandamon has better maturity to the sound, right? It is energetic and euphonic still, but it is well controlled. Where else I would say that the Gumiho is a lot more bolder. Should I say that even more engaging and even more exciting, but it does not sound as polished as this Pandamon. And also not forgetting that because of the implementation of balanced amateur in Gumiho itself, it does not sound really realistic to my ears, especially when subjecting it to very engaging and very energetic music. The upper frequency of Gumiho tend to sound a bit plasticky, or should I say metallic, depending on what genre we are talking about. And comparing this Pandamon with another competition, again within the same price bracket, which is KZPR1, right? Very popular as well among budget segment. The two offers different sort of sound signature. KZ being KZ, of course, it offers V sounding unit, which means that the mid-range of PR1 is not as pronounced as this Pandamon. So whoever who prefer a much pronounced mid-range should consider getting Pandamon instead of PR1. Technically, I would say that both exhibit similar sort of competencies, right? Both very good with many aspects of technicalities, especially when powered properly, right? And in fact, perhaps if I were to choose between those two, because of my subjective personal preferences, I would choose Pandamon for the fact that it sounds to me a lot smoother with the dynamic transients, which also means that the macro detail of PR1 is a bit more pronounced. This is less pronounced, but not in manner of being lacking. Okay, so let's just simplify everything up and what does Pandamon offers in general. Okay, I would say that it is a very well-rounded unit, right? Very well balanced, on a condition that, right, Pandamon must be allowed for proper burn-in, right? Out of the box, I wasn't so impressed with the sound itself. It's kind of a bit boxy to my ear, the way it sounds like. But most importantly, after at least 48 hours of burn-in and usage, it sounds a lot more open, as how it should be, because this is an open back sort of IEM. And because it's open back also, it is best to mention the isolation would not be as great as some purely closed IEM, right? And I think the other aspect is that tips tuning. It is very important, right? Finding the right tips to match this Pandamon is crucial, because it will ultimately decide how it will sound like, right? All in all, I would say that this is a very solid unit. I would highly recommend it, especially for people who want a bit more of balance toward the sound spectrum from top to bottom and mid-range as well. Alright, so there you have it, Celest Pandamon.